Hi, my name is Andy Collins. I'm otherwise known as Andersin, and I currently play for the free agent team nearest airport. When I think of video games and all of the memories, there's definitely one that stands out. Probably from an RTS called Total Annihilation. It came out in like 1997, but my dad was like teaching me how to play it because that was like his game. As I got older and older, probably like 9 years old, he and I would face like the AI together and we would destroy the AI. It was like a fun father-son thing to do at night. Eventually, when I started hit like double digits, he was like, all right, you're pretty good at this. We're destroying the AI. How about you take me on for a test? I would send like my ground force after him. He would destroy that. Then he would try to like hunt out my bases and I would build like separate ones across. I would like let one get destroyed. I'd let it be like slightly defended just to like give him the illusion. Then he would try to like nuke my bases and I would have anti-nuke measurements. And then all while this is happening, I'd have a secret base just building a bunch of aircraft. So I had like 1,500 aircraft in like a lower corner of the map that after I got all of his nukes out, I just sent at him. And I completely wiped him out. And it was kind of like a bittersweet moment because I was just so happy and excited and I ran to the other side of the basement where he was at and he was just like dumbfounded. He was like, I can't believe my 10-year-old just destroyed me. I've always been a very competitive person. When it came to battling my sister for who could tumble down the stairs with a bunch of blankets and pillows first, to who could be the best in airsoft battles, all the way down to pretending sticks are lightsabers and coming up on top in all of the duels. For me, with gaming, it was finding that not only did I have a talent in gaming, it was more so finding something that I was good at that I could also be competitive with. I first discovered esports as a possible career path when I was watching pro matches back in 2013, 2014. And that's when I started to see the scale of how big these actually were. The venues weren't small, but they weren't like massive what they are today. But when you still see like 5,000 people show up to watch people play video games, and then the prize pool being $50,000, $100,000, and then majors I think were $500,000 at that time, it was very eye-opening, and it made me think like, maybe this is possible. The games that I grew up playing throughout my teen years would be Call of Duty Modern Warfare 4, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, I did the Modern Warfare 3, the Black Ops, the whole shebang. Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2 were always old staples on the PS2 to go back to, but the one that stuck out and perhaps changed my life in ways that I would never imagine was Counter-Strike, CSGO. CSGO stuck out because it was the first like real competitive like shooter. Call of Duty was more casual at the time, kind of just like brainless, keep on respawning, go at it. Counter-Strike was one life, that's all you have, and you have to make the most of it. Even as a casual, you could feel like a pro due to like the kind of clutches you could hit or the scenarios you would be in, how similar they were to pro play. Like there was always a pro scene in COD, but unless you were at the very top, it was hard to achieve that. Where with Counter-Strike, it was so immersed. It was so unlike every other game at the time. To Valve, the company that made its credit, they nailed it. I wanted to pursue pro esports, I think my junior year of high school. It was when I was competing in ESEA's main league. They had different leagues and their different like ratings for how difficult it would be. It was open, intermediate, main, premier, and then pro. I was 2 under the pro. And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm a junior. These people who are playing pro are 22, 23, 24, 25. I was like, I could definitely do it. And that was probably the first time when I was seeing it was possible, because even when we were playing in main, we were succeeding and doing fairly well. My parents' reactions to me wanting to play esports was probably that of any cautious parent. They want what's best for you, they want you to be happy, but they want you to be realistic. My dad now has looked at like the odds of becoming a pro gamer and it's 6 in a million. So they were very skeptical. My dad was more supportive than my mom initially, and there was a lot of caution that went with it. Essentially, they would be like, you can do this, but we want you to go to college, and we want you to take these classes, and we want you to basically build a backup plan. So if this does fail, you'll be set for life with doing something that you also like to do. To achieve going pro, or to at least start the baby steps of getting there, it actually stems back to a couple lands that I went to. Going to college is great and all, and applying to different schools is great. And I knew I wanted to do stuff with computers because I'm a big tech guy. I was really fascinated by programming and whatnot, and I divulged into a couple programming classes throughout like high school, but I was really into like the esports scene. So it was finding a school that would be good for doing something computer related and also having the time to pursue professional esports. When I was 16, 17, 18, I was attending a lot of local LANs. My team, called ISL Power, due to the iBuyPower scheme at the time, we were kind of like the Midwest LAN champions. But there was a certain team that also attended these LANs that would eventually be known as the Robert Morris University CSGO team. When I was 17, I went to, I think, like a Windy City LAN, and my team knocked them out, and they found out I was 17, so they tried to recruit me on a 50% scholarship, because at the same time, this is around 2015, 2016, RMU was one of the first schools to get into collegiate leagues for both League of Legends and Counter-Strike, and they were offering scholarships to build this program. They offered me a 50% scholarship, and I said no. And then the following year, when I think I was 18, 19, and in my first year of community college, there was another Windy City LAN that I went to that RMU's team also went to, and luckily enough, we beat them again, and this time they offered me an 80% scholarship to go to their school. This time I accepted. Not only could I go for the viable career path at a very heavily discounted price, but I could also continue trying to hone my skills in Counter-Strike with the, I guess, hopes of going pro. Because in my mind, it was like, all right, I go to college, I got 4 years, that's 4 years I could practice. When I went to college, I was pursuing esports, but I chose a major because it's having a backup plan. Everybody knows esports is extremely volatile. I know that esports is extremely volatile. What a lot of, I guess, younger people don't realize is that this isn't secured 100%. Just because you're good or you're talented or you're playing doesn't mean that you'll go pro. That is something that I'm really happy my parents got me to realize. Going professional in CSGO was always my number one. School was number two, but I always prioritized making sure that I didn't let school slip. Balancing that workload of school and pursuing professional esports was very difficult in the beginning, but a quote from my brother, "You will always be busy, but you'll make time for the things that are important." If you do not see school as important, you won't prioritize it. If you do not see your professional esports as important, you'll let that slack. Managing it was difficult. Pursuing a professional career in esports while in college and working part-time, the workload would be Monday through Friday. It was classes till about 2 p.m. and I would go straight into practice at around 3, and then I'd be playing CS probably from like 3 to 10, maybe even 11, 12, go to bed, wake up at 7, and rinse and repeat. And I did that 50 out of the 52 weeks in a year. As a student trying to pursue esports, I definitely sacrificed my personal relationships, my social life, I guess my identity. Achieving pro was becoming less of a reality as time went further on, and I kind of stagnated, and a lot of it was due to my own choices. Growing up, I always had this deriving self-opinion that I had to like prove myself. I had to prove myself. So I had a really hard time at being able to take criticism because I always felt that it was people coming at me to push me down, because that's how it's been for most of my life, having had to overcome a lot of difficult life choices that other people don't necessarily have to struggle with. So as the time went on, like 2018, then 2019, eventually to 2020, and I kind of stagnated in the same place, I started to come to terms with, well, maybe this is the end. The realization that maybe things weren't exactly working out was really hard to stomach, because for so long you tell yourself that this is what you're meant to do, that this is the path you're supposed to go. When all the people around you seem to be rising above you, it's very demoralizing. And then you start to do one of two things. You accept where you're at and you work towards where you could be, and you accept that things could change, but you're the one who has to change. Or you create excuses for yourself, and you tell yourself that it's other reasons why you're not where you want to be. It's your equipment, it's the other person, it's lag, it's whatever. It could be your schedule, it could be work. And unfortunately, in this case, I did the latter. I chose the excuses this time around. I was just playing for fun. I had an internship at this software developing company while I was pursuing my master's. That was going well, and as that was going better and better, my team was getting worse and worse, and I started to maybe realize that this wasn't an avenue for me. And I eventually came to the conclusion that the amount of time that I was putting into the results that I was giving wasn't worth it. And I decided to hang up the mouse for a bit. My parents' reaction was, it was like the prodigal son had returned. They were really happy that I was pursuing my backup plan, which was software development, because in their eyes, that was the more concrete career. That was what would lead to more stability, that would sustain me for the rest of my life. They knew I was sad because I attempted to follow a dream and I had failed. Shifting away from esports into corporate life made me feel very unfulfilled, kind of like a failure. I gave my all into something that I was really passionate about, and not being able to finish that goal left me with this sense of, am I good enough? Why wasn't I good enough? And then you get into the routine of corporate, where the rules and responsibilities are a lot more straightforward. They're a lot more niche. It's not as free-flowing as it was with esports. There was a little bit of comfort within that structure of kind of knowing what was going to be in front of you, but it left me feeling really unfulfilled and knowing that maybe if I just used my talents in a different way, I could have been so much more. Once I graduated, I had rent to pay, car payment, car insurance. Now it was the real world or bust. For the time being, I made my peace with it, and I decided to pursue something that I also had fun with, because it wasn't like I didn't enjoy software development. It was just, I was always a gamer at heart, so after work, it was back to gaming again. I really wanted to make it, but again, mom and dad were happy about it. I had lingering thoughts about competing. There was a team I played for called Thunder Logic, which was just a part of a really good close friend group of guys, and we were just competing and playing, and we were kind of doing it in our off time. One of the most notorious members is actually Pure from Xset. Bryce is someone that I've known for a while. He's one of the guys who I competed with, not to go professional, but more so just to have fun, and we became really, really good friends. The moment he and I would get done with work, we would go and log on and play like some Counter-Strike, and we would compete. It's more just for fun. So there was no practice, there was no dry stratting, there was nothing that went into it outside of just hopping on for matches and playing for fun. And ironically, I had never made MDL before. MDL is the league that is directly below pro in Counter-Strike. I played with Thunder Logic just for fun, hopping on with a group of guys that just enjoyed each other's company, and we qualified. And this was probably the first time I learned a very important lesson of just camaraderie and how much the emotional state of everyone actually affects your performance. There's always that little voice in the back of your head that says like, what if you make it this season? What if you're able to do it? And I think that's kind of what I was feeling throughout all of that. I accepted at that time that this was kind of over for me. As much as I wanted it to be something reliable, something concrete, it just wasn't going to be. Even though I loved it so much, even though I really was striving to make it, it didn't matter because realistically it wasn't possible. Again, it breaks a sense of your identity, because for the last, from the age of like 14 on, up until 21, 22, that had been my life. That had been the reason I got through college. So kind of parting ways with that is giving up this whole chapter of yourself. And at that time, 7 years, that's a quarter of my life. So a quarter of myself had been this whole striving to compete. It really makes you feel like you're kind of just walking in sheep's clothing, where you're there but you're not. You're going through society and you're working towards just this normal life, but it doesn't feel like that's what you should be doing. While I was working full-time, I wasn't pursuing CSGO as passionately as I was before, as real-life obligations took priority. When I first heard of Valorant, I was excited. It was a new tactical FPS by a developer that cared about its community, but I was also cautious because as much as I wanted to just hop back on that train, I needed to see what the infrastructure was going to look like and see how realistic this entire endeavor was going to be. Valorant ignited that competitive spark again. Now, all of a sudden, it was possible again. I still needed to see what that pathway was going to look like, but all I needed was a chance. Didn't matter if it was a 1% or a 90%. If there was a 1% chance that I could do it again, I was going to take that chance. The opportunity that I saw in Valorant was actually when Immortals decided to sign their roster. They signed a couple old previous semi-pro CSGO professionals that I had competed with and known, and seeing that these guys who were technically on the same caliber as me in Counter-Strike getting a pro opportunity in Valorant made me realize that it's possible. And that was the 1% chance that I needed to see in order to reignite the fire and get me on the drive. Having these adult responsibilities made it harder than it was previously before. And the reasoning why it was harder is because now there were people that looked to me to have a set amount of tasks done during the day. There was people who relied on me. So it didn't matter if I had a match or practice, those people were the priority. My boss at the time, Steve, was so helpful. He was a really big mentor for me throughout that entire time working, and he was also really supportive of my esports dream. So having him also being able to kind of tutor me to get what I need to get done so that I could pursue this dream made things streamlined. But for the first month or so, it was very hectic and chaotic, but eventually I was able to get a nice streamlined schedule that allowed me to pursue this opportunity. Having to deal with both, I guess the duality of both lives, one where you're working a 9 to 5 and then afterwards you're off time, and the other one, your 9 to 5 is your practice. It was very difficult to see how I was going to make it work, because on one respective end, I have to outwork professionals who have all day to do what they need to do, and what I have to do is work on my main job on my primary hours where these guys are already at work, and then afterwards I have to put in enough good practice time to be better than these guys. But it wasn't something that I was discouraged by. I've always had that competitive nature, and I've always been a hard worker, so I kind of took time to see what I would need to do in order to make that possible. And especially with COVID, I was able to work on off hours, which meant 9 to 5 didn't mean I had to work from 9 to 5. It just meant I had to get this subset of tasks done for the day, but it didn't matter what time I did it because there was no office to actually go to. One of the quotes my dad always told me was, anything worth doing in life is always going to be hard. So I knew that this was going to be difficult. I just didn't know to what extent. The pursuit to pro now was way different than when I was in college, because now I have real life obligations. My schedule was insanely busy and exhausting, but the thing that kept me going was really my dad. He kind of became a little bit more supportive. And then when Valorant shaped up to be a real plausible job opportunity, he was like, go for it, try it. He said he always knew I was brilliant, but he didn't know if I was going to step up to the plate or not. And I think a lot of people have the talent, but they don't step up to the plate. They don't take the risk. They don't take the opportunity. I had the time to take the risk. I had the time to invest into a potential better future. Having gone through a speed run at college and getting all my degrees done and having a full-time job, I realized that if I was going to make mistakes, I wanted to make them now. As I got further and further into this rabbit hole where I was getting closer and closer each time to a signing, and my team was getting better and better, and more North American organizations were pulling into Valorant, it was kind of like you're getting closer, you're getting closer, you're getting closer, and putting in the effort to wake up again and go to the 9 to 5, or putting in the effort to think critically about all the software problems that I had to solve, or all the new software I had to create. It became a whole lot harder to feel motivated to do that. Instead of wanting to create, I wanted to go watch VODs. Instead of wanting to program or innovate, I wanted to go play ranked and harness my skills, because to me, I was getting closer and closer to what inevitably would be a signing. The parameters that I set for myself in order to achieve this new goal of getting signed, I was giving myself a year, and if I still don't make it after a year, then I know I tried my hardest and I'm gonna be done with it. This would be a full year of 24/7, 7 days a week. I'm putting everything into it. I was working from 9 a.m. in the morning to around 4 p.m. and then I was practicing from 4 p.m. in the afternoon up until 10 o'clock at night. In order to balance work, gaming, and life, I had to sacrifice. What I sacrificed was time with friends and family. After 10 o'clock, it was my time. I'd go to the gym, I'd go home, and I'd get ready for the next day. It's a lot of social isolation. What people don't understand about going down this path is you kind of lose touch with what's happening around you. You are so tunnel visioned on what's in front of you and what you're trying to achieve. You don't get to hang out with friends on the weekends. You don't get to kind of go out on a weekday night to go kind of like decompress. You put yourself in a position where there's only one path forward, and you sacrifice everything that's outside of that. I knew it was going to be lonely, tiring, but I didn't know the level of isolation that I was going to feel. That year was the hardest year I've ever had to go through. My friends and family were very supportive. Sometimes they didn't understand. It's hard to tell them like, hey, I can't come see you guys for the next 3 weeks because I'm booked out and I have all this. And they're like, well, why? And it's like, well, I'm trying to achieve my dream. You want to be like, hey, I really do value and care and appreciate everything that you're throwing into this relationship. I just can't give you that right now. And that's sometimes hard to allow them to understand. Because the nature of Valorant and the competition was an open system and the viewership was very high for the caliber of teams that were playing, and my parents and friends were able to see that up front, they were very supportive in knowing that, unlike CSGO, this was very possible. What made me come back to the esports scene was the fact that Valorant was a door. Valorant was another avenue that was fresh and had an open system that was obtainable. So for me, I wasn't done yet, but I had to kind of hang the mouse up because what I was trying to do was near to impossible. Valorant coming out was just a timing that I had to take. What I didn't have before was the perspective and the mindset that I had now. That was what was going to be the difference maker. The first steps that I took were obviously to find like-minded people who were also in like similar situations, because a lot of times people want to go pro, but they don't know what that actually means. They don't know how much sacrifice, how much you're going to be really heavy on the time management and working towards achievable goals that you can set out for yourself. So the first person on my list was Bryce. Bryce and I are long-term friends, and there was no one I'd rather do it with. I was like, so when I was talking to him, I was like, hey, are we going to do this? And he's like, yeah. So I was like, all right, let's fucking do it. We were the same. This was both our last hurrahs. It was all or nothing. When it came to time management, perseverance, sacrifice, he had just as much stake in the claim as I did. After Bryce and I decided that we were gonna do this, we needed to make a team. We found Roy, who is known as Strong Legs, to be the in-game leader for us. We found Almighty Hunter, who was a notorious sniper for teams in CSGO that was branching over. And then we ironed out our roster with a very good up-and-coming support player called Thwifo. And that was our very first iteration of the Pretty Boys. The goal of an unsigned team is to get enough notoriety within the community to eventually get you enough attention to then get you signed on an org. When you play for an unsigned team, you're essentially building a portfolio. So the best way to diversify your portfolio is to play in a lot of tournaments, have notable wins against really high tier teams, and being able to show how you stand out as an individual and what you bring. Talent-wise, intangibles, is your communication really good? Is your utility usage good? All of that matters. So when you're playing as a free agent, it's about really honing in to make all of those as good as you possibly can, so that when the appropriate eyes are watching the match, they see it and take note. We had to show that we could compete and that we could take down these giants. Immortals, T1, TSM, Cloud9. The moment you take down these people who are getting paid and you do it not just once, but you can do it consistently, that's when the eyes start honing in on you. We actually started to get approached by orgs fairly early. Esport orgs are essentially the job opportunities. When you're a part of an organization, you're representing their branding and trying to promote it further while being underneath their banner. And in return, you will receive compensation for what you're doing, whether that's competing on a national stage or an international stage. They're basically the way in and out of having a pro career. As a player finally getting approached by an opportunity that you've so wanted all of your life, it's kind of unreal. I remember my first time getting into a call with the actual management of the organization I was supposedly going to be joining very soon. It was crazy because it finally felt like all the effort, all the work, all of the long nights and early mornings were going to actually mean something. It just justified all the hard work that I put in. It wasn't like a hypothetical like, oh, this org is like close to getting signed. It was like, that signing is going to happen. And now, instead of just being a hypothetical, like, what if, it was what if I quit my job? How much am I going to be making? What is this going to look like for the future? It opened up a new realm of possibilities that I never thought was possible. I can't tell you how awesome it felt. One of the orgs that reached out to us was XSET. XSET was a newer organization that was branching out and wanted to become the next big thing in esports. In July, they signed Thwifo. Thwifo was planning on bringing all of us on board, but he wanted to make sure that the squad was like steadily ready. So we spent the next couple of months preparing to be that squad. XSET offered us full compensation that would have allowed me to quit my full-time job. And that was exciting because I was already tired at the level of what I was doing. Having XSET come to the table and be like, hey, we can take kind of these financial burdens off your shoulder and it'll let you do what you love. That's the dream. The moment that I worked for was right in front of me and I was so ready to take it. When a player gets an offer, they quit their jobs and they make it their full-time so that they can put all of the energy into it. As the talks were getting further and further with XSET, I was encouraged more and more by my teammates to quit my job. To them, it was such a for sure, this is what we're going to do. I was a little skeptical. I was this close to quitting my job. And the reasoning why I didn't is because my job was kind of like my insurance policy. If I quit that before I have another job lined up, I'm screwed over. No matter how much my teammates would want to coerce me into quitting so that I could commit more time, until I got that paper offer, I wasn't gonna do it. As the offer talks were happening, we played in this 5K and things were going really great. We won the tournament, and then afterwards, I got pulled aside and told that my spot was no longer available, and a month later, they got signed to XSET. I was not going to be continuing to play with them, and that everything that I thought was going to happen right in front of me instantly disappeared. I was promised that we were going to get signed, and I was told to quit my job, and it's like none of that mattered to them. Everything just disappeared. I was removed, and I had to find out what I was going to do next. I wasn't mad. I was just really sad. And I remember the night that it happened because I went for a long walk around like the neighborhood that I lived in, and I was crying. I was so sad. It basically was, hey, this dream that you want to live, we're gonna go live it, but you can't. And it made me feel like all the work that I put in, what was it for? If at the end it didn't really matter. And that was hard. That was hard. It was demoralizing because it was the fact that like the people who I was playing with, my friends, were telling me to quit. They were telling me that I was gonna get something. They told me that it was right around the corner. To have people you spend every day with that you want to trust tell you that, and then at the very last second, as soon as it's becoming almost tangible in your hand, for it just to disappear, that was the hard part. I was really traumatized with playing with people who I couldn't trust because that was my livelihood. If I had quit my job, what would I have done? This was definitely the lowest point in my career because not only did the people on my team that I thought could trust go kind of behind my back, my lease expired with my apartment, so my roommates and I, we ended up splitting ways, so I got a 1-bedroom apartment by myself, and it was the first time where I was completely by myself. And not having any kind of like support group or family or friends nearby to kind of like help you push you through that was really, really difficult. The feeling of just like having your dream kind of taken away from you and then being isolated with nothing but your thoughts to think about it. I don't really wish that upon anybody. It's not a scenario that I thought I was gonna actually come back from. Now I got closer than I've ever got before, and I still wasn't good enough. Why did I want to invest more of my life with people I couldn't trust, with people who really didn't care about me? Or it felt like that. It really felt like people didn't care. But why would I want to invest more of my emotional energy into something that just continuously took and never gave? Quitting esports was the easiest option. I had nothing left to lose. One of the first things that I did after thinking I wanted to give up was I called my dad and I kind of explained to him everything. Because at this point, my dad was caught up to speed. I told him how the signing with Exit was going. I sent them pictures of the Discord messages between me and their staff, and how I had an agent now, and the agent was reviewing the contract. And I told my dad it's just a matter of weeks now, and having to call my dad and tell him that I failed. that was really hard. But in the end, I just needed to get it all out and vent. And then my dad asked me, he says, "So what are you gonna do about it?" That's where I was like, oh God. I was like, come on, man. Why do you gotta tell me that? Why can't you just tell me to give up? But he didn't, so I didn't. I wanted to make sure I never put myself in that position again. Bryce showed just how much of a good friend he was. He got me a tryout with Immortals. Just even having that showed me that there was still a chance, and that at least one of my friends really did care about me. That's what I needed in order to keep going. Having a support system in esports is so important, because everything could change in an entire day, and suddenly your life, which you thought was stable and normal, is suddenly ripped from underneath you. And if you don't have that support system of people who are to encourage you and to continue working on yourself to become the best version of who you could be, you're ultimately going to give up on building that person. And that's regardless of esports or not. After having the XSET opportunity fall through, I wanted to make sure that the people I was playing with were just as personally invested in the team as I was myself. So that now there's a level of camaraderie, as well as these are guys that I know I can trust. So I reached out to a couple friends. They already had something pre-existing going, and they brought me on board. And that team would be called the Slimy Boogermen. The next steps on Slimy Boogermen were to take down the big names consistently. And out of the gate, we had some immediate success. That landed us in First Strike, which was the first Riot-sanctioned huge event that had a bunch of big names. And it was there that we took down C9 White and BBG and put ourselves on the map.
2 against 3 here. Tournament life on the line for Cloud9.
Riot released their information about their next upcoming tournament, which was the Valorant Championship Tour, or VCT. We were entered to play in the Stage 1 Challengers 2, which was their second qualifier. We missed the first one, and we were putting all of our cards into it, working really hard. I even was playing from work at the time due to the fact that I had really bad internet at my own apartment. There is an old JCPenney's that I worked at that was turned into a VR place, and I would actually take all of my equipment to a back room just so I could get a solid internet connection. My boss at the time, Steve, so helpful. His whole mentality was, you can do it, but just after hours. But since VCT started in the middle of the day, I actually had to use my PTO in order to play in these tournaments. I would use my PTO, take that time off, and I remember strictly before we had our TSM game, there was a warm-up scrim that we had at like 3 p.m. and one of our players didn't show up for it. And we ended up going into the TSM game dry, and we got absolutely smacked. And this was another point where I just felt like quitting. I couldn't play from my apartment. I had to commute to work. I was still juggling a job and trying to play professionally. The stress and burden of it was just getting bigger and bigger on my back. I was isolated. I was seeing my family once every 3 weeks. Because if you're practicing Monday through Friday and then you have tournaments on the weekends, I would have one day to myself, which would be like a Sunday, and then I would go shopping, so I'd have groceries. And after losing to TSM, it just felt like I tried everything I could, and it still wasn't good enough. And I called my dad, and I told him, Dad, I think I'm done. I was just venting to him, telling him that I tried everything that I possibly could, and it still wasn't enough. Him being my dad, he just listens, doesn't really say much, just says, I understand. And then when things go quiet, he goes and says, now I know you've put a lot into this, but what's just 2 more weeks? What's 2 more weeks? And I go, what's gonna change in 2 weeks? And my dad goes, you never know. And it's crazy to think about that, because if I quit there, I wouldn't be here. What's 2 more weeks? That changed everything. The following day, Kyle reached out to me. Kyle, otherwise known as Screwface, was one of my teammates that competed with me during that VCT. He's one of my closest friends and probably one of the best players I've played with. He wanted to compete at the same level and passion that I did. And he called me and he told me, I'm gonna leave. He wanted me to come with him. He told me that if somebody is going to attribute and put that this much effort in, that everybody on the team should match it. And if they're not, then it's not worth the time. And Kyle was right. Whatever team Kyle and I were going to make, we were going to make sure that that drive was equally matched all around. We would get the coaching staff, the manager staff. We would get everybody that we would need, but not only everyone that we would need, but people that we would feel confident in, people that we knew were going to match our energy. We did an interview for the first entire week where we were scouting players, their work ethic, what their lifestyle is like, what their day-to-day looks like, seeing if their kind of energy matches ours. Slowly but surely, we started to pick up the roster. This roster was known as DHBK, otherwise known as Dahunka Bunkaloos. And the next VCT qualifier was in 3 days. The first day that we got on, it was after my work, so I went to the back room where my PC setup was located. I got done with work at 5, and I didn't leave that JCPenney's until 2 o'clock in the morning. And I did it again the next day. And the thing that made it so much different than all these other times is this was the only time where it wasn't just me engaging everybody until 2 a.m. Everybody was contributing. We all wanted it. And we did that for the next day. And the next day. It was crazy to think that we could accomplish in 3 days what I couldn't accomplish alone in 8 months. And then it was the qualifier time. This was the last qualifier for this stage, and there was going to be nothing else until the next stage happened over the summer. So this was our last chance to show that we can play at a high level and we should get signed. And we had 3 days worth of work to put in to showcase everything that we've been working on. We anti-stratted Space Station, we anti-stratted Built by Gamers. That's what our coaches and analysts were doing on the side while we were practicing and scrimming in those little bits. They had reports that were written out of us. We studied those reports. So when we came into those matches, we knew exactly what they were gonna do before they knew they were gonna do it. This was the do or die moment for me. There was nothing else after this. I could not keep the mental toll of working full-time as well as competing full-time together. I was struggling mentally really, really hard. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And when the time came to play, we fucking nailed it. To have that success in VCT and finally take down the big names, not just once, twice, 3, 4 times, but we did it consistently. And then to have the offers come in. It wasn't like it was before where I got the offer prematurely. This time I had worked for it. I did it with people I can call brothers. And to say that I accomplished something in Valorant history that no one's done, an unsigned team making it to the closed section, DHBK is the only team in Valorant history that's ever done that. To know that I put so much energy and effort into it, to have it finally work, was worth all of the trauma, the struggles that I went through in that entire year. This time around, being approached by orgs, it was completely different because this time I knew what we were looking for. We wanted an org that was going to represent the close-knit family that we were creating. We wanted an organization that understood that we weren't just creating teammate bonds, we were creating life bonds that would transcend even the team itself, regardless of what happened. There was one that really stood out and showed us exactly what we were looking for, and that was Dark Zero.
The reason we wanted to pick Andy up at first was his potential in Valorant, and it wasn't until we were actually able to get the team on a call where we had more like face-to-face interaction with Andy and could actually get to know him with his character, personality, and what he was all about. Very vocal, very opinionated, and kind of had like a little spark or fire to the things he was passionate about, which in this case it was Valorant, and that's why we were talking in the first place, so that was perfect.
I remember when I officially signed with DZ. And that moment is engraved as one of the happiest moments of my life. I surprised my parents and I went back home, and I had the electronic copy of the contract on my laptop, and I showed them the contract. I showed them that it was a real job. I showed them that this was everything that I've been working for. And I just go and tell my family. I was like, I did it. I told them I finally did it. And they were so happy for me. They saw me struggling with trying to make this work for so long, and seeing a kid at like 14 trying to achieve his dreams and then finally being able to make it at 23. I bet they were just so happy to see me doing what I loved. After I told them I did it, I just started crying like I'm crying now. And they were so happy because my mom wanted me to take care of myself, and I was really struggling trying to live both lives at the same time. It was really hard to finally be able to like tell my mom, I was like, I'm gonna take care of myself. I'm not gonna have to worry about things, and I'm gonna do it. And I signed, and then they took me out just to like a dinner, and I was able to really enjoy being in the moment for once and not having to worry about the future. And that was so nice. Honestly, it was just like a wave of relief finally going through, where it justified every hard moment, every failure that I've gone through to that point was all justified. So I signed the contract, and then it was getting ready to move. It was trying to find a subleaser, making sure that all my furniture that I did have at my apartment would go to like my brother who recently bought a house, getting all that transferred, and eventually just getting ready for my life to move. Before I did though, on my birthday, my mom gave me a letter that she wanted me to have when I went out to Vegas, and I opened it out while I was out here. And this is probably like the best way I could describe how it feels, because when I was struggling in Chicago, I would call my parents a lot, my dad especially, and they would hear a lot of like what I was struggling with at the time. So my mom wrote a letter basically saying that she was just so proud of me with everything I went through. From my parents not being my biggest supporters to my mom being one of my biggest supporters, it was just really, really crazy. But the last part, she just said, I am proud of you for your determination and perseverance to go after a dream and make it a reality. Go, Andersin, go. And that part just gets me.
Andy is very passionate. He loves kind of everything he takes part of in life. So just kind of coming in the door, he was just really gung-ho about every little thing he was doing in his day-to-day and how he wanted to improve the program and improve his teammates. He was very team-centric. He was all about us and we, never about himself or how he was doing.
It was like a new level of energy, because once we finally got out here and we were all living together for the first time, it's like going to practice and kind of seeing your teammates right next to you. It was like, all right, now we're in the big leagues. Like, this is what it's supposed to be like.
Very likable guy, friendly, and just kind of someone you want in your corner.
It was unlike anything I have ever experienced before.
They were very rambunctious, but it was exciting. There was more energy in the room than I've seen with teams before. And while that can be at their own detriment, at the same time, it really fuels them kind of to keep going and keeps the day alive.
We were surrounded with like-minded professionals. We not only had just like each other, but we had the support staff paving the way for us to be better in ways that we didn't know how to pave ourselves yet.
And he actually showed us quite quickly leadership traits that we weren't expecting initially.
Before DZ, we were all kind of contributing whenever we could due to the fact that we didn't have all the time. And when we got there, there was a co-captainship between Kyle and I. And it was like, all right, you two are the ones who are going to be in charge. You two are the ones who are going to plan everything. And that was one of the things that I wasn't expecting yet. Because throughout the entire time, I was used to being in a leadership position, but I was used to everybody contributing and then us formulating the plans. And this time it was truly in our hands and we had to run the ship.
He and us just really bonded over what Dark Zero was, what our vision for esports was, and how we wanted to handle the team, and he was all for it. And so with his analytical mind and his software engineering type background, it was just a perfect fit.
When you're an amateur, you're just grinding to get to that professional level, but you don't know what the expectations of that professional level are. And then as a professional, there's this whole new set of expectations that you are to accomplish to stay in the professional. And that was one of the things that really was challenging. But at this point, it was like I felt like there was nothing I couldn't handle, because what I just went through was the worst thing that I could have possibly imagined when it came to pushing my boundaries and pushing myself. And now I was in an environment where I was kind of like, push me, let's go.
One thing we noticed about Andy very quickly that was a little bit different from his teammates was how much fire he had and passion for Valorant and just taking it to the next level.
Being able to finally live my dream and have it be a reality that I get to wake up into every day, it's unreal. And it made me realize that those 7 years from start to finish weren't just obstacles, they were life lessons. It was character building, it was defining, and that has led me to where I am now, being able to wake up every single day. And it made me realize that this waking up doesn't happen without this, the work.
Andy meshed with DZ quite well. One thing with Andy is he came in completely open. He was ready to absorb anything he needed to. Him coming in was seamless.
Within like 2-3 weeks, we won our first ever 5K tournament together. To be able to finally experience that, it was just absolutely incredible. Dark Zero was everything that I could have hoped for. It was everything that I wanted. It was so much fun to be here and be a part of that. But like all good things, sometimes they come to an end. Things started to go south when we were making a lot of changes. We were in touch with what was the meta. We had a really good running at VCT, and we just unfortunately weren't able to close it out. The results that we were showing weren't what we were capable of, and we knew we needed to make some changes. And amidst a lot of those changes, we kind of lost our identity. We kind of lost a lot of what made us good to begin with. DZ was making some org changes, and we as players were kind of worried about our job security, because the whole point of DZ in the first place for us was we loved their infrastructure for developing players under the right system without having to worry about getting cut. I mean, the whole reason I signed with Dark Zero was for that.
We want to be a player-driven, player-centric organization. So any decisions we make, whether it's from the operations side, the content side, we want to think about, does it put the players in the best position for success and happiness and overall holistic type of success. We want to have the heart of the organization be as close to the players as possible so they feel a part of something bigger than just the team itself. So we want them to get to know our other teams. We want our Valorant roster to know our Siege roster or to know our Apex roster, and they can work amongst each other, and the IGLs can help each other and give each other advice. We want our partnership team to talk to our players so they understand how other types of revenue work with the teams and things like that. And then these players can start to feel a part of Dark Zero, feel more a part of them. Also just learn the esports industry as much as they want. So if they want to move on or take other career opportunities in esports, they have at least some of that exposure before they leave DZ.
After we played VCT and we ultimately flopped pretty hard, we were told to take some time off. Things weren't going to look the greatest. Kyle ended up getting a message saying that he was going to go meet one-on-one with the CEO to talk about the future of the team. And I think that's where it dawned on me that we were getting dropped.
Parting ways with that roster, with any roster, it's really difficult.
Kyle said that he was going to talk with them, and he went in at, say, like 7 o'clock at night to go have that talk. He didn't come back here until almost 2 a.m. in the morning, and Adam and I were just kind of staying awake, waiting to hear what was going to happen next.
It was more about a plateau that we hit and we were unable to overcome, rather than individual capability. We did a lot of rigorous changes and review and implemented different methods in order to get to the next level, but unfortunately we were just never able to reach that. And so it was kind of just a mutual understanding that unfortunately the roster with what we had at the time was gonna need some type of change.
We were all gonna get dropped. Everybody except Kyle.
While we want to sit here and make hard business decisions to change rosters and get to the next level, there's always that underlying connection that, change the team was pretty heavy.
It was just waves of emotions. It was like, I just threw everything into this. My identity is in this. I moved my life out here for this. I was angry, sad, kind of flabbergasted at the whole idea that that kind of like perfect illusion is just completely shattered just like that. It sucked. It sucked a lot.
Andy and I still talk quite often. We're fairly close, especially given how long he's been here. I wish him the best of luck. He's extremely talented, extremely well-rounded person, and whether he finds the success he really wants in esports or not, I think he's going to be quite happy in life, and he should be proud of what he's capable of.
Immediately after hearing the news of getting cut, I gave myself a time frame. I said, you know, grieving is a natural part of things. This stage or this part of the journey is over. For the next 3 days, I am allowed to be as sad as I want. I can cry as much as I want. I can show all the emotion. But after those 3 days, it's time to get to work. My old life, I already left it behind. I'm here. I'm not in Chicago. I gave up my home. I gave up my apartment. I gave up my furniture, my bed, everything that was mine to go live this dream. Now, it wasn't a question of, was I good enough? The question was, what do I need to do to get back to the level of standard of proper performance? Looking back, if this would have happened to me years ago, it would have been the end of the chapter. It would have been over. But I've been here before, and this time I knew how to handle it. As much as DZ failed for us, we all were able to take a lot of lessons from that and apply it for the future, where maybe this iteration of DZ failed, but the chances of all of us playing on another team again is possible. Without those lessons from DZ, I would not have been able to accomplish what I did on Nearest Airport. Everything that has happened to me has been in preparation for this point. Every time I failed, there was a lesson I could get out of it and I could apply it for the next time. I knew that I needed to find another free agent team to play with. I also knew that I wanted to surround myself with people who also had the same energy drive and who were also willing to prove something. I knew the kind of system I wanted to create. I knew the kind of environment I wanted to stand by with. I'm not afraid of failure. I'm not afraid of making mistakes. I'm not afraid to work hard. None of that bothers me because I've already gone through all of that and I've come out on top. At this point, it's a matter of time and perseverance. I'm gonna do it, and no one's going to stop me. I've given myself a time frame during free agency where, again, I do have responsibilities that I need to uphold, and I need the money to be able to support that. As long as I'm able to have the funding to do so, I can continue doing so. If I eventually get to a point where my choice is go back to a real world career or continue trying to make this my dream, I've probably outlived that and will make that hard decision. Being a free agent essentially just means that you are on the market available to any kind of paid opportunity. When you go into free agency, the only way you are going to stay relevant is if you're winning everything on top. So for me, the way I look at it is this. If I am good enough to be on a pro roster, then I will be dominant enough on a free agent team regardless of the team I'm playing on. And one of the players in particular that caught my attention was Profi. When he was playing on Space Station, he messaged me back in my Kooky Koala days to join Space Station, and I said no because we were having the conversations with DZ. I knew Profi had the talent to do what he needed to do, and I knew that he had a really good attitude. So I ended up messaging him, and that led me into meeting a lot of the core members of the team that would become Nearest Airport. Nearest Airport is different because it has people who are constantly self-evaluating. That is something that I haven't seen on a lot of pro teams. That's something that didn't exist on DZ, and I'm really proud to be able to see that kind of self-evaluation consistently happening in an unsigned environment. I've learned how to manage them professionally and being able to navigate not just through a esports career, but in a real world scenario. Problems are always going to present themselves, and you can either let them make you or break you. Now, these problems never break me. They just make me. They mold me into something better. My greatest successes are my failures. Overall, my esports journey has taught me that anyone can go pro, but it's the definitive qualities that determine whether they'll go pro or not. It's the perseverance, the sacrifice. It truly is how many times you can get knocked down and get back up. Anybody can have this life, but not everybody's gonna choose it. You need to be able to push through it. Realize that they are gonna have to give up almost everything in order to accomplish what they want. They have to continuously be pushing themselves to be a better version of who they were yesterday. I think a lot of people after hearing this are gonna call, my story sounds crazy. of how long I was able to continue going through this, and all the stress that I put myself under, and all the years. My years of 20 to 24, I really didn't live. I just existed within a schedule that I set myself and continued to keep doing what I needed to do because I told myself the end goal was going to be rewarding. I can tell you that if you ever do make it to the other side, you will never be disappointed in yourself for putting yourself through the work that you did. If I didn't keep pushing on for those 2 weeks after I called my dad and I gave up, I think a part of me would have lived with regret. What would my life had looked like? Because that decision effectively changed everything. I sacrificed so much to get to this point. My relationship with my brother, my sister, my parents, my friends, my mental health, my physical health, but was it worth it? Yeah, it was. And I would do it all again. What's next for me is unknown. The future's looking bright. I'm more excited than ever to see where I'll go. I'm open to all endless possibilities, kind of just taking it one day at a time, but not letting my foot off the gas. To those who are in similar boats that I've also been in, I'm no different than the rest of you. There's nothing special about me. I'm just someone who's going through the motions maybe a little earlier than you might. And hopefully by you guys getting to know my story, it encourages you and shows you that you're not alone. Anything is achievable, and sometimes all you have to do is just hang on 2 weeks longer.